Welcome everyone to IIT 2020 Future is Now session on food and agriculture. We have a great panel today and it will be moderated by Varun Deshpande. Varun serves as Managing Director at the Good Food Institute, GFI India, where he is focused on building the future of food by working with scientists, foundations, governments, entrepreneurs, and corporations to advance the alternative protein sector. As the son of a cancer surgeon from Mumbai, Varun has been deeply immersed in healthcare and technology from a very young age. He spent several formative years studying chemical and biomedical engineering at Technology Hub, Carnegie Mellon University. He then went on to work on implementing digital health in India and the United States, helping vulnerable populations through care coordination and a systems approach to healthcare. He has spoken at conferences and universities all over the world, ranging from the Indian Institutes of Technology to Harvard University, and his writing has featured in media, including The Hindu, First Post, and The Daily Guardian. In dedicating his work to the future of food and combining his duty to human and planetary health, Varun aims to help build a more healthy, sustainable, and just global food system, particularly across the developing world. Without much ado, Varun Deshpande.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for joining us here today at the IIT 2020 conference. The theme of the conference, of course, is about imagining and inventing the future. And during this session, we're going to talk about a question that is of material importance to all of us on this planet, to all of us in attendance. And we're going to talk to a couple of innovators who are doing a great deal of work to solve this problem and to think through these questions. So we're going to talk about the future of protein on this panel. And before we get started, I'm just going to make a quick presentation about some of the questions that we're evaluating as we think about the future of protein and how we feed 10 billion people on this planet by the year 2050. So I'm just going to share my screen. So the question we're evaluating today, as I mentioned, is a very important one. It's materially important to the future of our species, of our planet. And it is, how are we going to feed 10 billion people by the year 2050, 1/6 of whom will be in India, over half of whom will be in Asia, etc. And when we think about this question, one of the major things that we have to consider is that, unfortunately, we do face a lot of problems when it comes to the current system and the current challenges for our population. So just taking the example of India, we have among the highest cohort rates of malnutrition anywhere in the world. I'm talking about debilitating conditions like iron deficiency, anemia, neural tube defects stemming from folic acid deficiencies. These are conditions that completely hinder and hamper our population's ability to shape their own destiny and to be able to live thriving and fulfilled lives. It's also worth noting that we have among the largest farmer family cohorts anywhere in the world. Both of these things, our young population and our large agricultural base, have been described as our demographic dividend in India. But we have to remember that, of course, the welfare of our farmers is currently in danger. And it's a major question that we're grappling with today, being able to steward the welfare of farmers as well as vulnerable populations. And this is a particularly important time to be having this conversation, because we've seen, especially during this year, how crises can affect vulnerable populations. This is an image of essentially pandemic refugees leaving cities like Mumbai and walking hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers and miles back to their villages and their homes. This is what a public health crisis looks like in a place like India. This is what a climate crisis will look like over time. And this is what we're facing in terms of the issues that we currently have in the world today. So coming back to that question, how are we going to feed 10 billion people by the year 2050 without continuing to break the planet? Unfortunately, if we look at business as usual, we're not going to be able to do that in an efficient way. So just under a third of the Earth's surface is land. About 70% of that land is habitable, and we already use 50% of all habitable land for agriculture, and the rest is our dwindling forests and shrublands. Now, out of all of that agricultural land, we already use over 3/4 to feed livestock. And all of these resources, all of this land, gives us only 1/3 of global protein supply. So why is this happening? Why are we using all of these resources for essentially meager returns? It's very simple. We use an ancient technology that's been in use for a very long time, and it hasn't changed for over 10,000 years. We eat animals who eat plants, and that practice is currently breaking the planet. Take a chicken, for example. It takes in 9 calories of feed in the form of crops like soy or wheat or corn for every 1 calorie of output it gives us in the form of flesh. And fish, depending on the fish, can be worse. Pigs are definitely worse, and cows are much worse. So we use vast amounts of land, water, and energy, and emit vast amounts of waste and greenhouse gases to raise or catch these animals for their meat, milk, and eggs. And as demand continues to rise, we're pushing the planet to breaking point. We think about food waste in countries like India as being an extremely important problem, and we should, right? Something like 40% of all food is wasted globally. In places like India, that's happening due to post-harvest losses because of infrastructure and supply chain issues. In places like the US, perhaps it's food that's reaching your plate and is being wasted after that. But it's important to note that if 9 calories are going into a chicken and we're getting 1 calorie out in the form of flesh, and that is the most efficient animal that we farm for meat, that is still 800% food waste. And we've actually pushed these animals to their biological limits, and it's not possible to get much better than where we are today. Taking this issue a little bit deeper, take a look at this slide. It highlights some of the biggest problems in the global food system, all caused by some of the most popular animal-sourced foods that humans love to eat. So if you look at cattle, if all the world's cattle came together to form their own country, they would be the planet's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Or chickens, the most widely eaten meat in India, they release 40 to 60 times more carbon dioxide per calorie of protein than lentils. Maybe you're more of a seafood person. Well, over 90% of all fish populations are strained, including 1/3 which are actively declining, leading to all sorts of bad events that mean the oceans can't perform their critical job absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as effectively. Now, if you've been following the news about China, perhaps you'll know that 60% of the country's entire pig population has died from or been killed to deal with what's known as African swine fever over the last few years. And now it's starting to spread to other countries such as Indian pigs as well. Now, all of this sounds like a pretty bad deal, but it gets even worse. We already use, as I mentioned earlier, over 75% of all agricultural land and a quarter of all freshwater on the planet to feed and raise livestock. And we're running out of places in the ocean to get our fish too. This is why scientists at the UN and myriad other places say that industrial animal agriculture is one of the top 2 or 3 most serious most significant contributors to the most serious environmental problems that exist in the world, whether they're big or small, large or local. So if we care about deforestation, ocean dead zones, ocean acidification, species loss, greenhouse gases, any one of these issues, this is one of the most pressing problems for us to grapple with. And of course, these problems are not just constrained to environment and climate change as well. If we're talking about zoonotic diseases like African swine fever, they're the most common global causes of epidemics because they can jump from animals to humans. Not only that, the vast majority of antibiotics produced globally are not fed to humans, but to animals, leading to antibiotic-resistant superbugs, which caused the former head of the World Health Organization to declare, the world is heading towards a post-antibiotic era in which common infections will once again kill. This will be the end of modern medicine as we know it. So, of course, now that I've said all of this, everyone in the audience here today, all 14,000 of you, whoever consumes animal source proteins like meat, milk, or eggs, are just going to stop eating those things. And I've succeeded in my mission of getting us off animal protein, correct? No, that's obviously not true because in fact, those things are delicious and people want to eat them and they're aspirational. In fact, if you look at the global demand for meat, it's going to grow by about 50 to 70% between now and 2050. And in fact, a significant portion of this demand is driven by countries like India and China in the developing world because these things track with income. So coming to the topic of discussion today, what we focus on at the Good Food Institute globally and what our wonderful panelists focus on is giving people what they want, giving producers and consumers what they want, delicious products that replicate animal sourced foods or replace animal sourced foods, but are made in a different way. And these products are called alternative proteins, and they're meant to be a simple switch, not a sacrifice. They broadly fall into three major categories, three extremely exciting areas of food innovation, which are leading a lot of pioneering work in the food system globally. We're talking about plant-based proteins, such as plant-based meats or milk or eggs. We're talking about fermentation-derived proteins, which we're going to hear about from from two of our panelists, and we're talking about cultivated or cell-based meat, which we're also going to hear about from one of our panelists. Just to give you a couple of examples that aren't even being spoken about by the panelists here today. This is a plant-based Beyond Burger. It's made entirely from plant-based ingredients like yellow peas, beetroot, coconut oil, etc. It emits vastly less greenhouse gases, uses vastly less land and water. And this company is currently public on the New York Stock Exchange. It went public last year in one of the most successful IPOs for the last decades. If you replaced one of the three beef burgers that Americans eat on average every week with a Beyond Burger, it would be the equivalent of taking 12.2 million cars off the road or powering 2.3 million additional homes. Similarly, the plant-based Just Egg, which is made from mung bean protein, and mung beans are, of course, a crop that's been grown in India for over 4,000 years. Again, uses much less water, much less land, and emits much less CO2 than conventional eggs. And this company has sold over 60 million egg equivalents. As we move into the panel, I just want everyone to remember that what I'm describing is an extremely exciting area. It's absorbed billions of dollars of investment. The companies in the space are really pioneering and catalyzing a change in the food system. But what I'm describing is not inevitable. It requires all of us in the audience here today to come together to build pivotal partnerships to advance the future of food and to think through how we can support a more healthy, sustainable, and just global food system with delicious products that taste the same or better and cost the same or less, but which help us to unbreak the planet. We've done this before with different technologies. We've moved away from using animals in all sorts of areas such as transportation or industrial biomedicine. And we have the ability to do that in food today more than we've ever had in history. We have the ability to leapfrog over industrial animal agriculture in places like India, just as we did with telephone lines, and move to better systems that make sense for the 21st century. All right, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our wonderful panelists here today. So first up, we have, excuse me, just getting my screen back. Wonderful. First up, we have Arturo Elizondo from Clara Foods. Arturo is the founder and CEO of molecular food company Clara Foods, based in Silicon Valley. Clara is working towards a disruptive advance in food technology by developing real animal proteins without the use of a single animal, starting with the world's first animal-free egg white, requiring a fraction of the water, land, and GHG footprint used compared to the current factory farming model. Clara has been named one of the 50 hottest tech companies by Crunchbase, one of the 50 next companies to disrupt the world. And prior to founding Clara, Arturo served under Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the US Department of Agriculture, and the investment bank Credit Suisse in Mumbai, actually. He's been named to Forbes 30 Under 30, has been named the Person of the Year by the National Hispanic Institute, and is one of 10 Latinos who inspired the United States by BBC World News. Arturo, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Next up, we have Dr. Uma Valetti. Uma is a cardiologist, entrepreneur, and the CEO and co-founder of Memphis Meats, the world's first and leading cell-based meat company, producing meat directly from animal cells without raising animals. Uma sets the strategic direction and oversees the development of cell-based meat technologies with a focus on commercialization at Memphis Meats. In a prior life, Uma has been a Mayo Clinic trained cardiologist and has served in numerous leadership roles at the American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology, and co-founded or invested in several medical device and food tech startups. Welcome, Uma.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And finally, we have Thomas Jonas. Thomas is CEO and co-founder of Nature's Find, formerly known as Sustainable Bioproducts, which is a food tech company that developed a breakthrough protein technology I think you're going to be fascinated to hear about. Thomas has deep experience leading and operating in global businesses in industrial manufacturing and branded products, and has led in senior management positions at Midwest Vaco, Rio Tinto, Alcan, and Pechiney. Thomas is a graduate of HEC Paris and currently lives and works in Chicago, which is where he's joining us from. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Varun, and thank you, and thanks, Sanjeev, for having me today, or tonight for some of us.
Tonight, very late tonight, actually, for some of us. So, all right, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'd like to start by asking each of you a question about your work. So I'll begin with Dr. Uma Valetti. Uma, could you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did you go from Mayo Clinic to Memphis Meats, and what does Memphis Meats do? And of course, feel free to share slides as you talk about this as well.
Yeah, thank you, Varun. It's great to be here. I know IIT because I grew up in India, and nearly all my friends who went to engineering went to IITs, some IIT in India, and many of them are here. So it's great to actually join the alumni at IIT and the active students at IIT. So thank you. I just will tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll introduce the company. So let me see if I can share a couple of slides from my end. We are based in Berkeley, California. So I grew up in India. I'm from Vijayawada, Andhra Pradesh, and my dad's a veterinarian. My mom taught physics in college, and my grandfather was a physician and a freedom fighter. Growing up in India, of course, you're exposed to where food comes from, and my story starts off when I was really 8 years old, and this is my picture when I was 8. And a few years later, I went to a birthday party of my friend who was next door, and the front of the house was the food, the music, the dance, and the birthday celebrations. And then I went to the back of the house, and that's where they were essentially making the food. They were slaughtering the animals to feed the people in the front. And to me, that was really stark. A birthday, death day happening at the same time with incredible joy in the front and incredible difficulty in the back. And I grew up in a meat eating family. I loved eating meat and kept eating meat, but it just was that little experience in my head when I was 12 years old. It stayed with me for the rest of my life. And I continued on since my high school in Vijayawada, and moved on to JIPMER in Pondicherry, which is a medical school. And during my time in JIPMER, I started really getting very interested in how food came to the table. Just like many maybe of you on the IIT campuses, JIPMER had to run its own cafeteria. So the student body was autonomous, and I was the head of the cafeteria for 4 months. And then I went to the market to bring in large amounts of meat to be cooked with our chefs. And at that point, I saw large-scale animal slaughter, and that again was a real big dissonance in my head. And around that time, I said I love eating meat, but it was really hard for me to understand how it came to the table. So I stopped eating meat, and my goal was to be a cardiologist, and I wanted to always train at the Mayo Clinic. So that led me to fortunately be accepted at Mayo, and subsequently did my cardiology and interventional cardiology there. But the idea of wanting to be able to do something meaningful started off when I was a kid. The motivation was there, but the desire kept growing, but I didn't know how to do it. But at Mayo, and later on in my practice, we started using stem cells to regrow heart muscle, in which case, when patients had heart attacks or cardiac arrest, you'll bring them in and you'll take stem cells from them and re-inject them into their heart to regrow the heart muscle. And that's really where this idea came from, of can you grow food from cells? And from that time on, it was really hard to get it out of my head. It was about 15 years ago, and kept looking at it and recognized that all the scientific underpinnings are being there. We can grow food. We can grow food from animal cells. People have been talking about it for decades, but there was no one who was doing it. So that's what led me to start the company, and started that in 2015. At that point, there was no companies in this space, and it was really in the realm of science fiction. So it was a real scary time. Almost everyone I spoke to said, try not to do this. This is not possible. But there were a few who said, this is a world-changing idea. If we can actually grow food from animal cells. That would really be one of the solutions for the most desirable food that people have around the world is meat. It's at the center of the plate. If you can grow that sustainably, we can grow that in a very environmentally friendly kind as well as a very desirable way, it would be a win for all of us. So that led me to start Memphis Meats. And since then, we've pioneered almost all the major milestones that happened in this field. So very briefly, the work we do involves taking high quality animal cells. We don't need an animal to be slaughtered. We take a few cells from an animal. It could be an adult animal or a baby or from eggs. And from those cells, we identify the cells that can continue to grow and become muscle or fat or connective tissue. And we feed these cells with real high quality nutrients, just like a baby calf would eat. It will include a combination of amino acids and proteins and fats and sugars and water and oxygen. And we grow it in a very clean environment. That's the cultivation step where you're growing the meat, the cells are coming and touching each other and they start forming tissues and the tissues start contracting. So subsequent to growing them for a few weeks, we harvest them, which means essentially we take the feed away and we take the meat. And after that, the process is very similar to all of us on how we handle meat. It could be chicken, it could be duck, it could be beef. And we started showing these to the world. And that's really when the field started really becoming real, because here's an opportunity where we don't have to look at a meat alternative or something, but we could actually have meat at the table. It just doesn't require an animal to be raised. We can get it directly from the animal cells. So let me show you a couple of examples of what we've done. This is a chicken breast that's been sliced and pan-seared. So you can see the golden brown on it. That's the Maillard reaction that we all know. And then you can start seeing the fibers in the white meat chicken. So when you eat it, it's unquestionably chicken. When you cook it, it starts smelling the aromas in the kitchen. And even before it, on the raw form, you know what chicken looks like. This looks like chicken. So this is an example of how chicken grown from directly from chicken cells would look like. And here's an example of beef. We've taken cells from a cow and we've grown a meatball. So we've shaped it in the form of a meatball and we presented it. And this is one of the most iconic dishes in the Western side of the world. And we can do that really very, very, very consistently with growing cow cells. And here's an example of duck. We've taken cells from a duck. This is a duck from 2016 and identified the cells that could continue to grow and be very robust and have the nutritional features we want from duck. And we know that duck is one of the most popular meats in China. More duck is eaten in China than the rest of the world combined. So we wanted to show that the platform can extend to multiple species, mammalian species, avian species, or marine species. And we wanted to show the global nature of the platform and how this can impact India, it could impact China, it could impact the Middle East and the US. So that's really what we wanted to kick off. And it's been incredible to watch the success in this field. Since we started this, there's been more than 50 companies in nearly almost every continent in the world growing meat from animal cells. And this is probably going to be just the opening salvo, but there's enormous amounts of opportunity to make this meat better than what conventional meat is, healthier, easier to obtain, with less calories, less use of water, and really market reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So that's really what we're doing. I'm incredibly happy to come and share our experiences here. Happy to take questions in the future, but I'll pause there and pass it back to Varun.
Thank you so much, Uma. And Memphis Meats early this year announced a fundraise of about $186 million to go with its earlier fundraisers that came from folks like Bill Gates and Richard Branson and the mega food company Cargill. So congratulations to you on what I will say is a very good beginning towards the future of food. I'm going to go to you, Arturo, next. You jumped right into food and biotech entrepreneurship at a pretty young age, following some stints in political offices, as I said, and banking, including some time spent in Mumbai. So what is the Clara Foods story? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a pretty interesting trajectory towards food, and I think like Uma, a lot of my upbringing shaped how I see the world and how I ultimately wanted to make an impact. And I grew up in Texas and Mexico on both sides of the border, and animal protein was such a huge part of my life. It dominated our parties, birthdays, events, and it was a huge part of my culture. And I never thought about where my food came from. You know, like any good Texan, I had my barbecue every Sunday. And like any good Mexican, I had my 2 eggs for breakfast every morning. And I never really questioned where my food came from until I began going into government, because that's where I thought I could make the biggest difference in the world. I wanted to leave the world better than I found it. That was my, you know, my mission early on. And when I got to the US Department of Agriculture, I was in the sub-agency that regulated all the slaughterhouses in the country. And it blew my mind how incredibly massive the animal protein production complex was. In the US alone, which has less than 5% of the world population, we slaughtered over 1 million animals every single hour. And it was staggering. And then the more I learned about the impact of the animal protein system, you know, to your point, Varun, the environmental emissions, the fact that so much of the deforestation in the world, that it's the #1 threat to biodiversity, the #1 cause of extinction, is something that really resonated. And almost I got very angry that I didn't know about this beforehand. I wasn't taught this in school. And I began doing my research around all the different technologies. And ultimately, when I graduated from Harvard, I decided to go into government, to realize that my obsession with food was so much that I couldn't stay there anymore. And so I booked a one-way ticket to San Francisco. And I had no job, no place to stay. I think probably my first few weeks there, I met Uma just before founding Clara Foods, and realizing all the incredible people in the space wanting to build a better food system. And so my co-founder and I got together and said, hey, look, there are technologies out there that we can use to create foods that ultimately don't compromise, that break the compromise people have when it comes to eating, you know, healthier food or more sustainable food or more ethical food. Oftentimes people think, oh, well, it's super expensive, or it tastes like crap. And it's always, and the foods that are the most delicious and the most convenient that are found in all restaurants, you know, are oftentimes the ones that are the worst for you and the worst for the planet. And we wanted to completely dismantle that. And so we wanted to build a B2B ingredients company that can serve as a platform for for companies both big and small to create the foods of the future. And we knew that we had to work in replacing animal proteins, because those were, to your point, the most destructive parts of our food system today. And that's how we founded Clara Foods. And I'll share a little bit about what we actually do in the technology. So I'm going to share my screen. And we use fermentation and to make real animal proteins without using a single animal. And what that means is that, as crazy as it sounds to use brewing, it's very similar to a beer making, but to make real animal proteins without using animals sounds also like science fiction. But the crazy part about this is that it's been around for over 40 years. The first protein ever made without using an animal was insulin, which used to come from pigs. And now all insulin is made using fermentation for the most part. And so in the 80s, we literally had to grow pigs, kill them, extract the insulin from their pancreas, purify it, and then inject it into people. And it was this substance that was, you know, that had mixed consistency, that came from animals. It wasn't kosher, it wasn't vegan, it wasn't vegetarian, it wasn't halal. And yet people, if you were diabetic, you needed to take insulin as a life-saving drug. And you needed over 50,000 pigs to make a single kilo of insulin. Fast forward to today, and over 99% of insulin in the world is made using fermentation. And so we've replaced that now. And then the cheese industry took note of this technology, and actually cheese, as of the 90s, is now vegetarian. Prior to that, we had to literally kill baby cows to make cheese at industrial levels, because the protein that was used to curdle the milk to make cheese could only be found in the 4th stomach of baby cows that were only a few days old. And so again, we had to grow them, extract the rennet from their 4th stomach, and then add that to milk to get it to curdle to make cheese. Fast forward to today, and over 90% of the cheese in the US, and over 90% of the cheese, over 80% of the cheese in Europe, and around 80+% of the cheese worldwide is made using fermentation instead of baby cows that are slaughtered. And so we at Clara saw this evolution of this technology of how we as an industry have replaced the pig for insulin protein production. We've replaced the baby cow for rennet protein production for cheese. We thought, can we replace the chicken for egg protein production? And can we replace animals more broadly from the protein production process? And so today I'm very excited to share that after almost 6 years of very deep R&D, we have built a protein production platform that we're now monetizing. And so we are launching the world's first animal-free egg protein in a few months, which would come online early next year. And we have partnered with companies all over the world, but particularly one of the most public partnerships has been Ingredion, which is a $6 billion ingredients company. They're in over 120 countries, and we're working through the existing food supply chain to really, completely transform it, and without changing the consumer experience, really plug and play into the existing infrastructure so that we can accelerate and scale our impact much more aggressively. And that will get us one step closer to really converting the factory farms of today into the breweries of tomorrow. Thank you. And
fantastic,
yeah, I'm happy to address them later.
Thank you so much. That was really fantastic, and it is very sobering to note the level of inefficiency that existed in industrial biomedicine when we used to rely on animals to get, for example, insulin, or when we used to rely on baby calves to get rennet to mature cheese. I think it's unthinkable to get those things from animals today, and hopefully we can get there with these proteins as well. Congratulations on coming to market soon with your ingredients as well. All right, as I'll throw this to Thomas finally. Thomas, I will never tire of hearing the story of Nature's Find and how you got founded. Could you tell us more about NASA, Yellowstone National Park, and your miraculous, wonderful phi? How did you get here, and what do you have cooking at Nature's Find?
Thanks. Well, that's quite an intro, Varun. And talking after Arturo and after Uma, I mean, it's a pretty high bar that we're setting up here. I have a few slides that I'm going to try to share that hopefully will help illustrate a little bit what we're doing. So, as you know, so I'm French, in case any of you were thinking that this was an Illinois accent. It's not the case. I am in Chicago, but I'm French. And us French, we're known for two things. One of them is food. So we don't mess up with our food. And the second is love, as you all know. So this is about food, but I want to talk about love for 1 minute. And I want to talk about why I'm doing what I'm doing. So this is my favorite Valentine's Day card. And you might be wondering what you're looking at. But this is a Valentine's Day because it was sent to us on Valentine's Day 1990. And I actually remember that day. And all of us are in this picture. It's absolutely all of us. We are in this little blue dot that you see over there. That's us. That's everyone you know, everyone who ever lived. Everyone lived their life there. And I'm kind of quoting Carl Sagan here, because this picture was the picture that Voyager 1, sent to us about 4 billion miles away from planet Earth. And this little pale blue dot, that's us. And I think when we see that, it's difficult for all of us not to feel this kind of ping in our heart. And the feeling that this a tiny little home that we have in the middle of nothing, and Carl Sagan was calling it a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam, which is exactly what it is. It mandates us to act, and it mandates us to protect it, and it mandates us to do that because that's where we live, and that's where our kids are going to live, and that's where all the people that we love live. So that's really what started to put me on this journey and trying to do something that's a little better for all of us and for the future us as well. So we're talking about space, but our company actually has its roots in space in many ways. We started from a research project for NASA. And initially the goal of that research was to try to figure out if NASA was going to send a probe to Mars or to a moon of Saturn, like Titan or Enceladus, what would be the environment in which it would even make sense to look for life? And that, of course, defines what you put in the probe, what sort of instrumentation you bring. So if you go to the methane lake of Titan, or if you go to the geyser of Enceladus, how do you know? How do you look? And what do you look for? And this is really what put us on a journey trying to figure out what a very different ecology, what a very different life could we find in this region. And so if you want to think what you could get into a geyser, what you could find in a geyser in Enceladus, you know, maybe a good proxy could be a geyser in Yellowstone National Park. So for those of you who are not familiar, Yellowstone National Park is in the northwest of the US. It's this pristine nature, the first national park in the US, and it has anything from grizzly bears and all sorts of animals. It has these geysers as well, and these geysers are there because this is really the biggest supervolcano on the planet, and this gorgeous nature is sitting on a gigantic lava chamber. And so we went to survey the waters, and more specifically the microbial population that evolved to adapt in these environments. And this is a very short video that I shot with my iPhone. So this is my partner and co-founders and me with an iPhone in Yellowstone. And I think it's the first time we ever show this. So you see IIT is getting a first view here. But this is really, it looks like a different planet. And in many ways, it is a different planet. And you can see the tree line stops, and then you can see the sandy plain and these waters. And the pH of this water is about 2.3. So it's kind of your car battery level of pH. This is an acid, those are acid streams. And of course, you have one of the highest concentration of sulfur, of chromium, of a lot of things that typically would kill and destroy any form of life. But life finds a way, and that's what fills us with optimism. And this is one of the 10 to 15 new life forms that we discovered. And that specifically my co-founder, Mark Kozubal, discovered. And so this one is interesting for a bunch of reasons. First of all, it's an extremophile, so it lives in this acidic water, and it adapted in this very foreign environment. Actually, it does very poorly in our environment, which is really interesting when you think about cultivating it, because you just need to create an environment that's comfortable for it, and it de facto isn't comfortable for a lot of other microbial species that could contaminate it. It's also a filamentous organism, and you can see some of the filaments, so it has an inner texture and structure. It is also a high protein organism, about 50% protein natively. It's not an animal, it's not a plant, it's part of this third branch of life that we tend to forget, which are the fungi realm. And interestingly, if we think in the great tree of life, it actually separated from us more recently than it separated from animals. So this is actually closer to you than it is to a carrot, although it doesn't exactly look that way. It nonetheless is in terms of cellular machinery and composition. So we developed a technology to cultivate this organism, and it is a different type of fermentation. So it's not your classic submerged fermentation. We solve a bunch of issues around oxygen transfer through different and novel procedures. So we basically have a tray-based system. And what we cultivate over a few days is very much what you see here. So on the left, actually, you have a raw chicken breast, and on the right, you have a piece of organism that was grown over a few days in that very box. And there's a lot of similarities in texture, in color, and part of the technology was actually to develop it in a way that was fairly bland, so that we could put a lot of different flavors in it. So in a sense, what we do is cellular agriculture, but what's a little bit different is instead of trying to cultivate a high protein animal cell, we're trying to cultivate a high protein fungal cell. And in many ways, these organisms are less complex, and we're able to get access to the protein that we need in a simpler way. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but what we get is a very highly digestible protein. It's about 50%. The whole thing is about 50% protein. It also has a high level of fiber and some interesting fibers. Fundamentally, one of the key aspects here is the efficiency of the process. So if you were mentioning earlier the example of the Beyond Burger, we are one order of magnitude below in terms of use of resources, right? So 10 times below. So this is a slide that gives you a sense of efficiency per acre of land. And to get back to some of your initial intro, Varun, the rare resource on this planet is Earth, right? It's land. It's the land that we dedicate to making the food. If you have 1 acre of land, the best thing you can do if you want to make protein is use it to grow 5. And not just by putting the fermentation system, but it's just, if you grow corn, we can use the sugar, you can use the protein for other things. And as a result of that, compared to a cow, we are literally, you can see on this graph, we are many orders of magnitude more efficient. When we compare to soybean, we're 50% more efficient to soybean. So even if you're growing soybean, as a result of what we do, we can be 50% more efficient than soybean. So I'm talking to you here from Chicago, and across the wall here we have our pilot plant, which will be completed in a few weeks from now. And literally in this very location in Chicago, in the old stockyard, we will be producing in hamburger equivalent, if you will, what you would get out of many thousands acres, as a matter of fact, of grazing land. So the concentration and the efficiency of the process here is in a way very similar to what we got in computers when we moved from the transistor to the silicon chip. So going micro enable an efficiency of the process that's very, very, very important. So these are some examples of products that we've done and developed. Some of the texture that you see on the chicken nuggets here are the native texture of the organism. And so we've been able to do a very wide range of products, from dairy products to meat and all sorts of application. From paneer to we're gonna develop something very specific for India, of course. So that's what we do in a nutshell. We're here, as I mentioned, in Chicago, and so we're planning on getting to. We're planning. Sorry about that. We're planning on getting our first commercial product next year. So it's going to happen very, very fast now.
Great. Thank you so much, Thomas. And Nature's Find has also raised over $100 million from organizations such as Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which in turn counts among its investors Mukesh Ambani, whom everyone here in the audience would know. All right, so I'm going to go on to, we've had a great introduction to the work that each of you is doing, and each of you is doing really, really pioneering, really wonderful work. Let's go with one further question. We have about half an hour left. I have I'm going to ask a follow-up question first to Uma. We've just heard, Uma, that Singapore a couple of days ago announced their approval process for cell-based meat. It's the first time anywhere in the world that companies are now able to go through a regulatory approval process and bring cell-based meats to market. It's a major milestone for the industry globally. As the first cell-based meat company ever, I wanted to ask you a question about the current state of play at Memphis Meats. What are your priorities for the next few years? What kinds of people can help in terms of partnerships or getting involved in the space?
Yeah, thank you, Varun. I think it's important to note that this is an ecosystem that is building up very rapidly. Like I said, when we started, we were the first company in the space, and we've kind of shown the world many milestones of how you can do multiple species, what the products would look like, that you don't have to give up eating meat. Now, one of the paths to get to market is also to get regulatory approval. And as a US-based company, we've been working with the US regulatory agencies, FDA and USDA, pretty closely in the last 18 months. And as you can see, in March 2019, the FDA and USDA came out with a joint guidance on how they would like to be able to introduce cell-based meats into the world. So that's a real big milestone for the entire ecosystem. And the approval in Singapore is also another step forward in that same direction, because Singapore is an important indicator of the interest for countries that have to really depend on food safety, food security, and how they can manufacture protein and meat for themselves in the future. So I think it's really a strong indicator that this is inevitable if we continue the progress that we've already started. So having said that, one of the things that we at Memphis Meats are really focusing on is scale. It's one thing to launch a product in a single restaurant, and it's another thing to be able to have a consistent, sustainable, and scalable supply and a production system. So we've been very heads down in building the industrial scale processes on how to manufacture cell-based or cultivated meat at large scales. And we're in the process of developing and completing our pilot plant. So very similar to Thomas, we've kicked off the first plant in the world under one roof to be able to do the entire production process. So we could have a scalable, industrially robust system that we can deploy regionally or nationally or globally. So that's really where our focus has been. And consequent to that, there is an enormous need for talent. So we've been hiring pretty vigorously in many engineering disciplines, as well as industrial scaling and food science disciplines. And talent comes from some of the top execs in the world, whether they are at biomedical companies, they're world-class academics or former federal regulators, or top-tier business people and creatives. That's kind of where we are building the team. We're also very cognizant of the importance of personal responsibility and ownership for every team member that comes to Memphis Meats. So in the spirit of that, culture is an enormous impact for us. We are drawing people that are incredibly self-motivated to say, we want to have an impact on the world that lasts well beyond us, be involved in an industry that shapes the world in what we haven't been able to do for thousands of years. And that's an incredible amount of talent coming towards us. And, of course, IIT is an incredible place. And in the scaling process that we're in, we do have enormous need for talent from people from disciplines like the IIT and the work we need to do going forward, getting this into commercialization. So that's where our focus is. We've also won the best and brightest companies to work for in the nation 2 years in a row. And that's an important thing to get from the culture of how we're working to bring many disciplines together. Look, our mission is global. We want to be able to empower entities, small, medium, or large, to be able to figure out how to produce meat for themselves. Because like we talked about, meat is the center plate of nearly almost every culture in the world. And the demand for meat is doubling. So we have 750 billion pounds of meat being produced now, and it's going to go to 1.5 trillion pounds. And the current systems just cannot even come close to matching that. So I think having this available in the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years is going to help us realize the vision of not giving up what we love, but not giving up the planet that we love as well. So I think it brings these things into clear and direct focus. And we're very grateful to have the support from investors who see the impact. We are going to be able to also expand our investments. There's been quite a bit of inbound reach to join the mission that we kicked off. And we hope to be able to, as the pilot plant continues and we start putting products out into the market and go through the regulatory process in the US and outside the US, we think that's also an enormous boost, not only for Memphis Meats, but for the ecosystem. So that's really where our focus is at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Uma. Extremely well said. And I think this is urgent, this is solvable, but not without concerted effort. And the kind of work that you're doing is really pushing the industry forward in that sense. Arturo, I think a similar question. You mentioned the partnership that you have with Ingredion, one of the largest food ingredient companies in the world. I'd like to ask you where you see, you mentioned also as well that Clara will have products in the market in a few months. What do you see your next milestones and how things are going to evolve for you over the next months and years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll copy and paste a lot of what Uma said, because I think in terms of partners, talent, and culture, I think that those are all really core focuses of our companies as well. But I think in terms of milestones and where we're going, so now that we're at Clara at a really critical inflection point. We've been we're one of the oldest companies in the space, like the 5th oldest, and we've been very head on R&D to build and develop this platform. And now we're transitioning, now we're at this key inflection point where we're now transitioning from an R&D shop to a true commercial enterprise. And that's where partners are going to be key. And so we actually launched our first product earlier this year. It was a soft launch. We haven't publicly announced it, but we now have, we're now actively shipping product, and we'll be formally announcing it probably in the next few weeks. So that's also a very exciting development from our side. But really for us, we have now a core pipeline of proteins that we'll be starting to onboard to the market. And really our core focus is on developing and building the best partnerships possible. We want to focus on continuing to develop these products and continue developing the technology and add to the pipeline, making the world's first, real veg eggs that you can use as ingredients to make cakes and meringues and omelets and also beverages and other products that are currently not possible to use eggs with. And so we'll start launching our first several products over the next 12 months. And really what we're focused on now is securing the best partners across the world. Fortunately for us, because our technology has been around for decades, we know we can access international markets pretty aggressively once we launch in the US. And so for us now, it's a matter of onboarding partners in different countries. So we typically look for 1 or 2 key partners, in different countries that will allow us to really scale and ultimately work with them to develop our products and then ultimately launch them in those respective markets. So that's something that we're really excited for, and where we're completely focused so that we can scale up, ramp up production, so that at scale, our technology has a potential to fundamentally undercut the wholesale market of animal proteins. And so that's where, for us, once we are a penny cheaper, it's we let the invisible hand do the work at that point. And that's been very, that's really our North Star, is how do we, fast forward to the future and look at a world where we look at ourselves and look back in astonishment of how was it possible that we grew animals at this scale and enslaved them and put them in factory farms to literally put calories in our mouth and to have a tasty product. And I think Clara and having a B2B ingredients platform will be critical for that. And so that'll be our priority for the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the food safety and public health and environmental risks that entail, right? So, exactly. I mean, and by the way, all of those problems affect the developing world in a far greater proportion than they do the developed world, right? So if you talk to the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, that is a body that has a few hundred people and is tasked with dealing with food safety for over 1.3 billion people, right? I mean, there is really an overwhelming amount of work to be done in the developing world. We have low and middle income countries have something like 43% of the world's population, and we have a far greater proportion of the food disease related deaths. So I think that's just something that we absolutely have to look at getting away from.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead after you.
Yeah, so I want to completely echo what you're sharing, and that's exactly why, for us, like India especially, is such a critical market, because of a lot of the growing animal protein consumption will be coming from this part of the world. And we've been actively looking at partners here, and I'm excited to share that the conference chair, Sanjeev, is actually one of our investors, and we're really actively looking at what does it look like to launch in this country.
Wonderful. All right, Thomas, you mentioned exciting news. You've moved into a production facility in Chicago. You'll be in the market very soon with different types of products made using Phi, your wonderful microorganism. So what does Nature's Find and the industry need at this stage of your journey, and what's next for you over the next months and years?
So I think two comments on as far as the industry is concerned. I can only again echo what was said by Uma and Arturo. I think there is a lot more talent and collaboration, and this is really an ecosystem in itself that's emerging out of nowhere, literally, and changing changing the food system. So are we there yet? Absolutely not. There is a lot of new things that are going to happen. Someone asked me recently a question, which was, with Beyond Meat and Impossible, do you think that that's it? The market is done and all the positions are taken? And my answer to that is that that question is the equivalent of asking in the 1990s, so are Ericsson and Nokia going to corner the mobile phone market? I think we are in a situation where it's going to continue to change at a very rapid pace. And hopefully through this discussion, I think people can have a glimpse of all the other solutions that will be coming. Something that Uma and Arturo are working on are absolutely fascinating. So I think there's going to be a lot more option, fascinating field, very interdisciplinary as anything that require evolution and innovation. And you know, Uma's actually own personal journey is really a demonstration of that multiplicity of and for you as well, Arturo, right? I mean, multiplicity of optics brought to or angle brought to a problem. As far as we're concerned, for us, the next steps are going to go commercial in the US and go commercial as fast as we can internationally after that. So we're really eager to do that. A lot of that is determined by local regulations as well. So we are already engaging or will be engaging with regulators in various regions of the world. So it's going to be something we want to do very, very rapidly, and India is very high on our list. In terms of talent, for us, what we do, the way we do our fermentation is completely different than a classic fermentation. So we actually bring robotics in the fermentation process. We have a tray-based system, and we are moving many thousands of trays. So we are interested in people who understand robots, not in a way that you make it complicated, of course, but in a way that you make it simple. We are looking at material science, food science, of course, and there is something really fundamental in the understanding of the biology. What's interesting in the biology today is everybody wants to be a gene jockey, and a lot of people forgot about really the physiology. And when we talk about eating things, there is that physiology angle, and cultivating and growing things, the organism, there's this physiology angle that's very important. And those are all talents that we are very eager to continue to attract.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think, you know, one thing I will say, you know, being in conversation with multiple IITs, universities like IITs in India, food technology institutes in this part of the world, at least, I can say that the path to a career in food has never been sexier, because the kinds of things that are being done in the industry now, particularly in the future of protein, are offering young people, students, an opportunity to live out their values and align it with a career in a way that has not but perhaps been possible in this industry. It perhaps has been possible in other industries like hardware, digital technologies, etc., but certainly not in our industry of food. And you know, biotech also comes into this. So I think all the people in the audience, as Uma, Arturo, and Thomas have said, whether you're coming from computer vision, robotics, manufacturing, meat science, chemical engineering, industrial engineering, these are all disciplines that can be well applied in this area. All right, I think we'll do a final round of questions, a really sort of quick fire one. I'll start with you this time, Thomas. We've discussed how perhaps one great application of nature's finds technology, because of the nutritious nature of FI, could be to target malnutrition at scale in different countries, right? And because it's such a versatile ingredient, it could go into different types of foods in different parts of the world. So what does that look like? How will our ability to create large-scale fermented protein possibly impact nutrition and things like farmers' incomes as well?
So that's a very interesting question, especially in the current context of India, where we are farmers that are, you know, having the question and the doubt about the future that we see. And frankly, in the context of global warming, in the context of limited resources, those questions are not only going to be of concern in India, they are going to continue to be of concerns worldwide. So today, the Organization of Agriculture, even in India, I mean, the use of the growing wheat in region where it's depleting the water tables. I mean, all these things are happening. And so one of the questions that a lot of people ask is, well, that's great, but guys like you're probably going to just destroy the poor farmers, and you're terrible because you're just being supported by a bunch of Silicon Valley billionaire, and you're going to make this even worse. I don't think that's the case at all. As a matter of fact, in our particular case, our technology is leveraging an organism, a microorganism that has a phenomenal enzymatic capability. Why is that relevant here? It's relevant because what it means is that it's very good at using as a source of feed to grow itself, so that we can cultivate it, some very simple product, including a lot of agricultural byproducts that today are really treated as waste. And again, being able to use an extremophile that can survive in very acidic and very toxic environment really enables us, and therefore enables the farmer, to actually generate a second crop for waste products, that typically would be burnt or would be discarded at almost no values. So instead of just letting it go to waste, our little microorganism can eat it and directly transform it into a protein. And one of the things that I think is worth mentioning to the audience, because we tend to lose track on that, animals do not make protein. The cow doesn't make protein. We don't make protein. Animals are merely protein concentrators, right? Only plants and microorganisms can actually make protein. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind, because if you think about, if you start thinking and looking at the world that way, you can see all this huge carbohydrates reserve, this huge amount of biomass that are actually available that might not be very valuable because they're not rich in protein, but microorganisms can turn them into very valuable protein. And I'm so absolutely convinced that this is opening tremendous opportunities across the world to leverage some low value streams and create, in some cases, secondary crops for farmers. So a lot more to come on this front, I'm sure, not only from us, but I'm sure from other companies in the years to come.
Thank you, Thomas. Uma, we're at the end of a very strange, surreal year in 2020. Now, looking forward through to the end of the decade, 9 years into the future, where might we be on our trajectory in alternative proteins? What is cell-based meat's path to proliferation? If you and companies like you succeed in providing that viable alternative to animal-sourced foods and meat, why will you have succeeded, and what are the possible blockers?
Yeah, I think it's a real good question to think of. What does it look like 9 years from now? And when we start thinking about 2030, I would expect cell-based meat to be one of the most desired and one of the most available meats across the shelves in majority of the places that actually sell meat from an animal source. So as we talked about previously, cell-based meat is animal-based meat and animal-based proteins. So the demand for animal protein has been constantly increasing despite all the difficulties we've had with questions related to climate change, or questions related to animal welfare, or questions related to just the inequality of availability of animal protein production across the world. The consumption has continued to raise. That's because people love eating meat. So I think it'll be positioned as one of the most desirable choices of getting meat to the table. And that's only 9-10 years from now. And that's really where I want to see cell-based meat continuing to grow. You have to keep in mind our food system is going to be a pluralistic food system. It's going to have the need to be able to grow meat conventionally. It's going to require the ability for people to start seeing, yes, I can start seeing the transition happening over time, where more and more sustainable scalable production techniques will be available without me having to forcibly give up what I love eating, or somebody else makes a choice of rationing meat for me. We want to be very well positioned at that point to say, look, people don't have to make the choice of giving up what they love eating. And countries don't have to worry about food safety or food security for their populations demanding meat. And we want to position cell-based meat as a real strong solution by the time we talk about 9 years from now. The second thing to keep in mind is for farmers that we talk about in India or across the world, when we grow meat from animal cells, it's going to still require feedstock. So it's going to require a number of plants to be grown that are going to be a source of sugars or amino acids. And that's a really important piece to continue to show that we have high value crops that need to be grown. And for those that are not growing animals, but actually are really interested in higher wage jobs, when we start bringing cell-based meat to various zip codes across the world, the type of jobs we create are also going to be higher wage, and we expect that also to be really, going along with how economies are asking for their own workforce to be able to have access to higher paid jobs. And I think both of these are going to be a real powerful force in 10 years from now. And when we start adding on science and technology on top of it and saying, can you make meat better? Because right now we're constrained by what the animal can do. But if we start selecting out the types of meat or the cells that actually have a positive influence on your health, maybe decreases the risk of cardiovascular disease, decreases the risk of chronic diseases, that's an enormous opportunity. We are not even talking about at this point, but it's going to come in the next wave. And that's what I'm really excited about. And I think that to have a lasting impact on the planet we're on and going forward, can't think of a much stronger mission that we have at the time of feeding ourselves, our families, and our future generations, and using available technologies now to start paving a path for it. So I want to come back to the incredible talent that is present in the IIT alumni and as well as the current students. I would really urge you to think about the impact you can have. There's a need for multiple disciplines to come together in order to take the biggest challenge we've ever faced in feeding humanity. And I want you all to be a part of it, and feel free to write to any one of us. My email is uma@memphismeats.com, and I'd love to be able to hear from you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Uma. And I live 3 kilometers away from Asia's largest slum in Dharavi. And if we went there and we talked to a family of 4, they would say we're eating 1 mutton meal a week for 460 rupees. And perhaps if we could, we would eat 2 mutton meals a week for 920 rupees, right? Because it's tasty, it brings people together, it's a sign of affluence. And I think what we need is exactly what you said, catalyze a sustainable, affordable supply of high quality meat that brings people together, that enables us to not have to give up the foods that we love and not give up the planet that we love. Arturo, my final question is for you. It's a similar question. We're talking about these categories that are trillion-dollar categories, right? And I think, as Uma said, we need a pluralistic food system. So what do you think will happen specifically in these high-value precision fermentation type proteins over the next decade, and where do you think our food system is going?
Yeah, such a great question. But before I dive in, I want to echo so much of what Thomas and Uma have shared, because I think it's very much aligned with how we see the world. And also, if anyone wants to reach out, my email is arturo@clarafoods.com. In terms of the frontier for, I think, alternative proteins more broadly, but specifically for precision fermentation, which is what we do, I see it as 2 frontiers. Number one is the basics, which is replacing our current animal products with sustainable with our options. So for us, that's eggs as one example. But what I see is that the egg is what chickens make today, and it's the same exact product that they've been making for millennia. And an egg has over 200 different proteins right now. So if you had an egg this week, you had over 200 different proteins. So many of the products that we consume today have hundreds of proteins. Many of them have not even been named before, fully characterized. And so there's so little about the food that we eat today, and in some ways, so much opportunity. And what I see in terms of the future of food is, one thing is to replace the animals, but 2 is, how do we actually usher in a future of food that is so much more delicious, so much more functional, has even better texture and flavors that we have never even experienced today. And what that means for us is that we make our proteins one by one. So instead of making all 200 proteins in the egg, we can make them individually across any animal species. And what that means is that we can mix and match proteins and create essentially new ingredients that the world has never seen. And that's what for me is really exciting about how it's not just about replacing what's already out there, but how do we leverage 21st century technology to create truly food 2.0 that is not just sustainable and ethical, but truly novel and incredibly delicious.
Uma, Arturo, Thomas, thank you so much for your time. This has been really wonderful. I mean, I get to talk to you guys quite often, and even my mind is blown by all the progress that you continue to make and all the leadership you continue to show in the future of food. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. I want to call on Sanjeev Goyal, who's of course the IIT 2020 conference chair and our wonderful host. Sanjeev, thank you for bringing all of this together. I'd like to just throw it to you for we have 5 minutes remaining. If there's any remarks you'd like to make or any questions you'd like to ask.
First of all, we have all the time we want. Okay, I'm conference chair, so I can run it as long as I want. Today is my day. So, Varun, a couple of things. And the big question should be is, why did I put together a food innovation panel in a tech conference? Because we are all techie, almost 500,000 of us. And interesting story. This panel took more efforts than the panel the whole segment I put called global segment. We got 69 speakers in 10 days, including governor of Jammu and Kashmir, 8 billionaires, 6 unicorn CEOs. We did it in less than 10 days, all of that. Their schedule was locked, including Pawan Goenka, CEO of Mahindra. Why am I telling you all this and all our audience? Because I personally believe, and Arturo and me had a lot of conversation around it, food innovation, where food innovation is today, it's like early 90s or middle 90s, when we were figuring it out, what is internet and what internet can do. Next 20 years, there are going to be phenomenal opportunities, in my opinion. So I am fully vested in the food. I had several conversations with Varun and Arturo, and I'm figuring it out what is next for me and my fund. So we have a small fund at Droid Capital LLC. I've invested in 26 deals, but food is only one. Clara Food, and I got lucky that through some friends I met Arturo. It is more accidental. And I started reading and learning a lot. So now let's come back to what am I trying to do with this panel? Or what is my goal? There are 23 IITs, close to 120,000 students. IIT Delhi has 3,600 PhD students right now. It's not a small number. Combined IITs, I don't have exact number, but if I have to guess, I will say at least 20 to 30,000 PhD students. These are like the best brain you can find on earth. And I'm not saying they're better than anybody else. It is at one place, you can get all of them. You don't have to go to 50 places. And that is the beauty. I'm not saying IITians are smarter than anybody else. We are almost equal. The only difference I find is, and I did that research and I interviewed a lot of people on my impact series, we believe in ourselves. You give us a challenge, we will solve it. And that is my question to you. I'm looking for challenge you throw to us, and let's see 500,000 of my friends, if they can solve it. And we create next 100 unicorn or 1,000 unicorns. In next 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. But we are looking for challenges from you, because in your journey of food innovation, you must have found tons of opportunities. Arturo and me talked about, I don't know, 30, 40 opportunities. You said, it's okay, but I don't want to be an operator personally. And that's the reason we couldn't do it. Because I believe my role today and where I am in my life, I want to foster innovation. I want to foster entrepreneurship. And I truly believe only through fostering innovation on entrepreneurship, we can change the world. And we really need almost like a movement. And that's what I'm calling IIT 2020. We are starting a movement. Prime Minister of India came and he talks about what? Entrepreneurship. Governor of Jammu and Kashmir came. He talks about what? Entrepreneurship. Mr. Goyal, he's also a minister. He came today, Piyush Goyal. He talks about entrepreneurship. India is open for business. 23 IITs are looking. Help us find more problems. That's all I need. So I will start with Arturo first. So why don't you give us a challenge and let's see 500,000 IITians can solve it or not.
Eliminating animals from supply chain by 2040.
That's a good grail. Puneet, I hope you're making notes of it.
I am, yes.
Right. Uma, what do you think?
Yeah, Sanjeev.
Give us a challenge.
accepted.
You know, IITians, we don't take no for an answer, man. We will figure it out.
I know, like I said, challenge accepted. I want to be able to have the impact in India of how can we scale our production system in India so that there is no shortage of meat, poultry, or seafood. And in order to do so, how do we figure it out in India with the supply chains and with the ability to be self-sufficient? That's really what the challenge for India is. And I would love to be able to work with you and your alumni group here.
So let's talk a little bit about it because this problem is still not defined. I need defined problem. Arturo gave me a goal I can think. In India, in Mumbai, there is a dabba system and you're that guy on his, I don't know, whatever it is, but they deliver your lunch. Kindly define me exactly your problem is. What do you mean by supply chain issues?
If I set up a pilot plant in India, for instance, I want to be able to get high quality ingredients that will grow the meat. I want to be able to have the ability to distribute that meat into a place where it's getting into the hands of people that are buying it off on the shelf. So in order to do so, we need to be able to have a clean supply chain. We need to be able to have clean production, industrial scale production systems in India. So that'll be the manufacturing units. So, we're talking about billions of pounds of meat, but we have to start small. So the first thing is, if I want to build a plant in India that's going to produce high quality meat, let's say tandoori chicken, right? How do we deliver tandoori chicken to a zip code in Mumbai, right? I want to manufacture it and deliver it to a zip code in Mumbai.
Consider it done. We will find a solution for you in less than 12 months. If not, I will write a check and we'll build a company together on this. This is what's solving problem. But I'll be surprised. I'm sure Varun and me, and with 500,000 IITians, we can find that. It's not a tough problem. Give us a difficult problem. I'll come back to you later if you want me to. Thomas, do you have a problem for us?
I have two for you. I have two for you. And they're actually very connected. So the first one is very simple. The amount of protein made in India, we need to do times 10 here. So let's invent a completely new system, a new paradigm where we can use everything that we grow, we can turn it into protein, where we can really create protein and make everything that comes out of India turn into protein. And so let's do times 10 the amount of protein, right? So, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of solutions to go toward that. And the second challenge that I have, which is an enabler of that first challenge, is help the regulators in India, but everywhere in the world as well. Help the regulator accelerate, understand, and accelerate the transition. And let's have 1,000 cherry blossom trees. Let's have these thousands of companies that will come out of this, flourish and invent all these many ways of feeding the world. And I truly believe that India, for so many reasons, is a perfect place to do that. The challenge is very relevant to the current Indian situation, whether it's driven by global warming, whether it's the current amount of people that are working on farming with very low wages. So, and the extraordinary capabilities of engineering in India. There is probably not a lot of places in the world that are better qualified to solve these issues, and I really mean it. And I'm not even talking about Indian cuisine. So I think all of these are things that I challenge the IIT to take this over and join us in solving this issue and finding all the many solutions that we will need. Challenge
accepted. Puneet, add it in the list, and we will talk to all the ministers and governors we have in the network. We have almost 20 plus IITians in politics and in bureaucrat, so many of those. Yeah. Let's talk offline. We will definitely make it happen. I can
We will.
arrange a dialogue. I don't know where will it go, but I definitely have access to the people, and we can arrange a dialogue. And we
We
will
all
work
are in
with you
it.
to change policies.
Yeah.
So before I invite Puneet to thank you, you have no idea. You made me and you made all of us look rock star, and you have opened so many opportunities. It's phenomenal. Thank you very much, Arturo. Thank you very much, Uma. Thank you very much, Thomas. And Varun, very special thanks to you. I'm not very happy you drove me nuts setting up this panel, but I owe it to you. You are brilliant, and I'm really grateful for our friendship. Thank you. Puneet,
Thank you.
floor is
Sure.
yours.
Uma, Arturo, Thomas, Varun, thank you so much for this informative talk on food tech. And I'm sure our viewers gained a lot from the speakers. I also hope that it has challenged them to think how they can contribute to the mission. Well, innovators have the opportunities to work on so many things like farm to fork traceability, blockchain comes to mind, sustainability, be ready to feed 10 billion people by 2050, improving freshness, eliminating food waste, limit use of too much water, land, and other resources. Viewers, when you think of tech, you should think of tech in food. You don't really need a degree in agriculture. If you're a computer engineer, get internet to the farms for sensors. Chemical engineers, material engineers work on sustainable materials. Civil engineers work on sustainable farms. It is a huge opportunity to engineer the future, and we should start now. With that, I would like to thank everybody for the panel. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank
Thanks.
you.